Okay. Welcome to Metro News Lunacy. If you can imagine The Guardian, if it was in print form and in newspaper boxes all around the GTA at every train station and bus station, that's what you'd get with Metro News. This is going to be more of a freestyle sort of commentary since I've been busy of late, and if I were to do proper editing, it would be all year. So anyways, Metro News did this 5-day research, if you call it research, on sexual assaults in Canada. But unfortunately, Canada doesn't have a Milo Yiannopoulos to run around and debunk their bullshit. So let's get down to the first one. They go through about 4 stories of sexual assault on Canadian campuses, and all across Canada. Now there's 5 women, but I guess they could only find 4 stories, so, one just jumped on the bandwagon. Now, as far as I'm aware, only one of these ended in conviction, or was even reported to police. You think if this was such a rampant problem, they'd find multiple examples, but well, go figure. Now, the one case where it did end up in a conviction, the man was found guilty, sentenced for rape, and thrown in jail, which should happen. The rest seem to be just accusations, so I'm really not sure if they're real or not, or if they were even reported to police. The Mandy Gray one was broadcasted all over Canada. The others, I honestly heard nothing about until now. Now, the first article they did really wasn't all that bad. There wasn't anything too crazy about it, which is surprising because the author, Rosemary Westwood, is... If you look up crazy feminist bitch in the Canadian dictionary, she looks at you and calls you a misogynist. As you'll see, though, it just keeps getting crazier and crazier as the days go on. There is a nitpick I do have with the first article. Some started anti-sexual assault organizations on their campuses. Some filed freedom of information requests against their schools, seeking to better illuminate their largely curtained and bureaucratic processes. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. However, they don't go into this anymore, so I'm guessing that the Freedom of Information Act really didn't reveal anything, and the schools weren't exactly hiding anything from them either. Alright then, let's continue. And most significantly, 3 women have filed human rights complaints against their schools that could change the legal landscape for sexual assault in the country. Now, I do have a problem with this, not against filing the complaints, but the fact that the human rights courts in Canada are best described as kangaroo courts. Judges can dismiss evidence just because they don't like it. And we all remember the case of Gregory Allen Elliott, who was kicked off the internet for 2 years and had his career ruined and almost his life ruined, and he was found innocent. This man could not use the internet for 2 years, even though he was falsely accused. This is the very definition of guilty until proven innocent. And the crazy bitches that falsely accused them and knowingly falsely accused them, nothing happened to them. In fact, they're still being painted as victims by the Canadian bullshit media. Alright then, let's get on to the second part. Campus sexual assault is a national problem, but no one's pursuing a national solution. Well, that's because it's not a national problem. Sexual assault and rape is legal all across Canada, and each province has its mandate for it. Alright, one of the defining elements of the fight against campus sexual assault is Canada is what it lacks, a national strategy. Well, like I said, it doesn't need a national strategy. To some degree, this is by constitutional design. Yes. We have no federal education minister, not for colleges or universities, no federal responsibility for post-secondary education. No, we don't, because post-secondary education isn't run by the government. Politically speaking, it's not a national matter. Yes, it's not. In this vacuum, the provinces are left to negotiate a new era of sexual assault legislation. Well, yeah, God forbid something be done on the provincial level. Okay. In Ontario, the new bills have been passed last year. They're going through the bills of all the new sexual assault bills. Okay. But while these efforts have been greeted with hope and praise, most notably by politicians and university administrators, yeah, I bet, critics argue that the legislation doesn't go far enough. Oh, good God. Okay, let's go down. Meanwhile, the Minister of Status of Women, I don't even know why Canada has that. I guarantee you we don't have a Minister of Status of Men. I'm gonna go on a limb and say that right now. If you can prove me wrong than do it. Patty Hedgedew has been tasked with developing the federal strategy against gender-based violence, which she told me will include campus violence. But Hedgedew's staff took pains to reiterate that campus sexual assault is a jurisdiction of provinces. Well, thank God for that. And Hedgedew said her ministry's role could only be one of support. Yeah, well, so what? Okay. Working very closely with the provinces, the territories, looking how we can actually support the work. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here we go. Hedgedew said consultants with campus sexual assault survivors, brought up the example of the U.S., where there has been a far more aggressive national push to tackle the problem. You mean to the point where there actually is no problem, and you're going on witch hunts? You know, like the Rolling Stones article where they were forced to issue an apology and admit that there was no rape? Okay, let's continue. Alright, blah, blah, blah. She goes off to stroke off Barack Obama and the idiot we elected Prime Minister. Okay. Manitoba NDP MLA and proponent of a bill to require sexual assault policies on campuses in that province suggests that the public statement from Trudeau could be a useful start. Potentially, there's room for federal intervention. No, there isn't. But before that, it would be great to see the Prime Minister weigh in and say consent culture is important, he said. I can just imagine Trudeau's statement. If you convict a rapist, he wins. Okay, let's get on to the third one. Many Canadian schools aren't collecting sexual assault data, and no one seems keen to force them. Well, that's the police's job, isn't it? I mean, if you're sexually assaulted or raped, don't go crying go to the police. File a police report, then they can't ignore you. Why is this so hard to understand? Okay. All right. Stanford students, wear a 1 and 3 sign on their caps during graduation in June to show solidarity for a rape victim. The 1 and 3 represents a statistic that claims 1 in 3 students will experience sexual assault by the time they graduate college. But you just said no one's collecting data, so how do you know this? I mean, where are you getting the statistics from? They don't show it. I mean, I thought U.S. campuses had batshit crazy statistics with 1 in 5, but apparently Canada is worse than the Congo. I mean, Canada campuses are probably the most dangerous places alive if you look at these statistics. Maybe instead of accepting Syrian refugees, we should all be going to Syria because apparently it's safer over there. Okay. When it comes to a campus sexual assault in the country, simple question. Questions do not net simple answers. Yes, they do. Asking for a national number of sexual assaults is easy, but here's the truth. We have absolutely no idea. We don't even attempt to know the answer. Well then, once again, where did you come up with the 1 in 3? You just pulled it out of your ass? And we're unlikely to anytime soon. Yeah, I'm pretty sure if we did know, that would probably ruin your narrative. When the Toronto Star tried to get a handle on the national number of campus sexual assaults back in 2014, efforts proved fairly fruitless. Well, not surprising since the Toronto Star is like an ostrich with its head stuck in the ground. Some schools collected data, some did not, some posted data publicly, some did not, and because what data did exist wasn't collected in a consistent manner, it was impossible to make meaningful comparisons between schools. Okay. The CBC didn't fare much better. In 2015, it found just 700 reported cases on 87 campuses between 2009 and 2013. Well, it sounds like they did fare much better. Just because they didn't find a large number doesn't mean that they didn't fare much better, if it's accurate. But according to an academic studies in the U.S., between 1 in 5 and 1 in 3 women will experience sexual assault on campus. Applying those proportions to Canada suggests that 230,000 and 360,000 assaults among the 1.1 million women that Statistics Canada reported as enrolled at Canadians' post-secondary schools in the 2013-2014 academic year, when the agency last counted. Let me try to explain something to you, you stupid lunatics. You can't do that. You can't just say, you know what? We don't like these numbers in this place, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to another country, take those numbers, and apply them to this country. You can't do that. There's fundamental differences between the US and Canada. You just can't say, well, we're going to apply the US numbers because we don't like the Canadian numbers. That's insane. That's beyond a logical fallacy. That is just retarded. 2, it's not 1 in 3 or 1 in 5. It's actually 1 in 53. Damn numbers. But don't worry, you're only off by a factor of 10. I'll leave a link in the description below where an academic feminist actually debunks this 1 in 5 myth and shows the faulty statistics where they were used to basically just arrive at this bullshit. Okay. So even if all schools could be counted on the record and publicize every formerly reported sexual assault, the results wouldn't come close to representing the true number of victims. Many survivors simply don't tell their schools anything. Well, now you're just speculating. How do you know that? There is no possible way you could know that. You're just pulling crap out of thin air. Okay, she just goes on with more of the same, blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is good. The biggest problem with the government and efforts to date on both sides of the border, she said, is that they don't include victimization surveys. Students at every university or college should take the same uniform anonymous survey, she said, so that the data is comparable across campuses. And it should be publicly available and searchable for all students. So let me get this straight. You're going to make every single university and college student take victimization surveys. What could possibly go wrong with this? Okay, let's get to the last part. If the U.S., which requires schools to report formal complaints of sexual assaults, had this kind of system, the problem would have been solved 10 years ago. No, it wouldn't. In order to solve a problem, you actually have to be honest about it, which you're not. I've shown that. Okay. Canada is far behind the U.S. when it comes to combating campus sexual assault. You mean like how the Rolling Stone published a rape story without proof the main attacker even existed? And then they had to take down and retract their story for their faulty reporting, and then had to resort to creating excuses. And who could forget Mattress Girl? You know, that girl that falsely accused somebody of rape and carried around a mattress on campus? Then made a reenactment amateur porno video of the whole event that never took place? And yet somehow was awarded the Woman of Courage Award for, I don't know, lying. This is the kind of progressive nonsense they want in Canada. And Canada's already the land of the Tumblr, but let's go on. Okay. In the UK, thanks to guidance over 2 decades old, some universities have avoided any kind of reporting or disciplinary policies around sexual assault, and there is no national legislation mandating either. Well, that's because there are no more men in UK universities. Okay, blah blah blah, more of the same. Alright, recent media investigations found 1 in 3 universities women face sexual harassment or assault, and that schools had even or uneven or absent policies for tracking assaults. Well, that's because the media is full of shit. Metro News, you're living proof of this. Okay, let's get to the last one. I'm getting tired. Canadian schools need to start treating sexual assault survivors less as victims and more as experts. No! Just because I get my car broken into doesn't make me an expert in B&E. The cops aren't going to come to me and ask me to solve investigations because I had my window smashed and my iPhone stolen. What kind of lunacy is this? Oh, she's a women's studies major. That explains a lot. 5 days is nowhere near long enough to talk about campus sexual assault. Yeah, it's about 4 too many. Okay, in our week-long series, Metro has attempted to frame this ongoing crisis. It's not a crisis. I don't accept that premise. 1 in 53 isn't a crisis. Okay, blah, blah, blah. But there are many aspects we did not get to cover. We did not investigate how racism and sexual violence intersect. Listen, Rosemary, I know as an SJW wank job, you're just dying to talk about race, because it's all you progressive lunatics ever want to talk about. But guess what? Anybody with a rational thinking brain doesn't give a shit. We did not talk about how gender identity and sexual orientation impact violence. Well, gender identity and sexual orientation, according to you nut jobs, is a social construct, so it's really not important. If colleges, universities, and our communities at large are ever going to be made safe, all of these must be taken into account, which means no simple solutions, but plenty of opportunity for improvement. Well, I hate to break it to you, but they are safe. In fact, colleges and universities, at least in the US, are one of the most safest places a woman can be. And you know you've gone too far when universities and colleges, who are supposed to be housing young adults, have to have trigger warnings for this so-called dangerous faggot.